We are holding in middle of Seif Gimel in the Maamar Zeis Chukas Tafshin Chavtas. In the last Shiurim, we learned the question, the Rebbe's question, Seif Aleph. In Seif Aleph, the Rebbe asked, what is the connection between the mitzvah of Paraduma and Moshe Rabbeinu? Rashi says in the pasuk, "V'yikchu elecha," that le'olam yinikras al shmecha, that forever the Paraduma will be associated, the mitzvah of Paraduma will be connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, to the extent that the Paraduma is called by the name Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the name of the Paraduma, and we know it's Mavur in Chassidus that whenever we find that something has a particular name, that name teaches us and tells us about the essence of that object or that person that is called by that name. So if the Paraduma is called by the name Moshe Rabbeinu, that means that Moshe Rabbeinu is the essence and is the inyan and the teichin of Paraduma. Paraduma is something that has a very deep connection to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Rebbe asked in Seif Aleph, what is this connection? What connection does Moshe Rabbeinu have to the Paraduma? So the Rebbe went on in Seif Beis to give two explanations as to what is the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and the mitzvah of Paraduma. First of all, the Rebbe introduced from Chukot that Paraduma does not only refer to the specific mitzvah of Paraduma, but rather Paraduma represents and refers to all of the mitzvahs, the fulfillment of all of the mitzvahs. Why is this? The Alter Rebbe explains in Chukot that Paraduma represents the idea of Ratzi V'Shuv, and all mitzvahs need to be fulfilled in a manner of Ratzi V'Shuv. We're not going to elaborate on that idea. We already spoke about that in the last year, but that's what the Alter Rebbe says in the Chukot, that Paraduma represents Ratzi V'Shuv, and all of the mitzvahs need to be fulfilled in a manner of Ratzi V'Shuv. So therefore, Paraduma represents all of the mitzvahs. Says the Rebbe, based off this Akdama, being that Paraduma represents all the mitzvahs, that based off this we can understand the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and Paraduma. The Rebbe says that based off Tanya, that in order for a Yid to fulfill the mitzvahs properly, in order for a Yid to stand up to the challenges and the nisyanis of the Nefesh Hamas and Yetzer Hara, a Yid needs a special sinas koyach. A Yid needs a special tool to stand up to the challenges of the Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Hamas. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that through reminding ourselves that every Yid has an ava, has a great love to the Eibishter. How great is a Yid's love to the Eibishter? To the extent that a Yid is ready to be Meiser Nafshe. A Yid is ready to give up his life to keep and to retain this connection with the Eibishter. That's how great a Yid's ava to the Eibishter is. A Yid loves the Eibishter so much to the extent that he's ready to be Meiser Nafshe. He's ready to give away his life to retain this connection with the Eibishter. If a Yid would remind himself that he's ready to be Meiser Nafshe, to remain connected with the Eibishter, so that will help a Yid come by all of the challenges that are presented by the Nefesh Hamas and Yetzer Hara. How is it? What gives a Yid the koyach to be living in a constant tnuah? What gives a Yid the koyach to be living in a lifestyle that he's always thinking about Mesiras Nefesh? Mesiras Nefesh is an idea of bittul. When a person is giving his life away to the Eibishter, that's the ultimate bittul. That's the ultimate self-nullification. And that's something that's very unnatural. A person naturally thinks about himself, thinks about his own metzias. It's very hard for a person to be living in a constant state of bittul, in a constant state of Mesiras Nefesh. What gives a Yid the koyach to be living in this lifestyle, reminding himself and living with his ava, with his Mesiras Nefesh? The koyach for this comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe, which represents the idea of bittul, like Moshe says, V'nachnu ma, Moshe represents the ultimate idea of bittul, the ultimate dedication and the person that is the most given over to the Eibishter. So Moshe is the one that gives every Yid the koyach to be living with this constant message, this constant lifestyle of Mesiras Nefesh. So in other words, where does the Yid get the koyach to fulfill mitzvahs and eifim Mesiras Nefesh? From Moshe Rabbeinu. And that is the first connection between Paraduma and Moshe Rabbeinu. Paraduma represents the mitzvahs, and who gives the Yid the koyach to fulfill the mitzvahs with Mesiras Nefesh is Moshe Rabbeinu. Then the Rebbe went on in Seif Beis to say that there's another way to explain the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and Paraduma. And that is that there's, first of all, another way of explaining the connection between Paraduma and the mitzvahs. What is this new way of explaining the connection between Paraduma and the mitzvahs? Paraduma is the ultimate chayk. It's the ultimate mitzvah that transcends and goes beyond our human intellect. We know the rule is by Paraduma that Paraduma is mitaris atmeim and mitamis atahirim. paraduma is what we use to make those that are impure pure by sprinkling some of the ashes of the paraduma on someone that's impure. That person becomes pure. He becomes tar. However, the person that was sprinkling on the impure person becomes tummy. He becomes impure. So the mitzvah paraduma makes no sense. On the one hand, it's mitayr, the tmeim. It makes those that are impure pure. And on the other hand, it's mitayr esatahirim. It makes those that were pure impure. So it's a mitzvah that does not make sense. It cannot be understood with human intellect. However, we fulfill this mitzvah. Why do we do this mitzvah? Because it's the Ratan of Hashem. It's the will of Hashem, whether it makes sense or not. So paraduma is the ultimate chayk, it's the ultimate law, it's the ultimate mitzvah that has no rational, we can't explain with human intellect. And just like the mitzvah paraduma makes no sense, so the truth is that zayis chukas ha-Torah. Every single mitzvah, every part of Torah, the foundation, the very essence of every mitzvah is that it's the Ratan of Hashem that transcends our human intellect. That's the foundation, that's the essence of every mitzvah. And part of a yid, the job of a yid is to fulfill every mitzvah, even the mitzvahs of mishpatim, and even the mitzvahs of eidos, even those mitzvahs that we think we have rational explanations as to why we fulfill those mitzvahs. We are meant to fulfill those mitzvahs because they are the Ratzon of Hashem, just like we fulfill paraduma because it's the Ratzon of Hashem. So that's another explanation. That's another way of explaining the connection between the mitzvah paraduma and all the other mitzvahs. Just like paraduma is a chayk, just like paraduma is a mitzvah that makes no sense, so too we are meant to fulfill every single mitzvah just because it's the Ratzon of Hashem. Who gives us the ability to fulfill all the mitzvahs because it's the Ratzon of Hashem? Moshe Rabbeinu. Like it says, Zichru Teres Moshe Avdi. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Eved. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Eved to the Eibishter. And the Torah that was given to us by Moshe is a unique Torah. Although it's a Torah that makes sense, although it's a Torah that's rational, Torah is Chachma, it's logic. But on the other hand, being that the Torah is Teres Moshe Avdi, so therefore, when a Yid learns Torah, Moshe gives the koyach to a Yid that even when he's learning Torah and he's using his intellect, using his seichel, he's understanding the mitzvahs, there are mishpatim, there's eidos, but a Yid remembers and a Yid's able to be in tune and aware that the essence of every single mitzvah is that it's a chayk, that it's a ratzon of the Eibishter, l'mayla mitam v'das. So that is the second explanation between Moshe, the second explanation that explains the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and Paraduma. Paraduma represents all the mitzvahs, because paraduma is a chayk, just like all the mitzvahs are meant to be fulfilled as a chayk, because all of the mitzvahs are the ratzon of the Eibishter Shalmayim Matam V'das. Who gives us the ability to fulfill all the mitzvahs? Because they are the ratzon of the Eibishter, Moshe Rabbeinu Zichru Teres Moshe Avdi. However, in the beginning of Seif Gimel, the Rebbe asked the question, on this second beer, on this second explanation between the connection of Moshe Rabbeinu and Paraduma, the Rebbe asked the question in the beginning of Seif Gimel. The question was that seemingly it says in the Medrash that the Eibishter was megala the tam Paraduma to Moshe Rabbeinu. L'cho ani megala the tam para. The Eibishter revealed to Moshe the reasoning of Paraduma. So seemingly it's not understood. If Moshe Rabbeinu understood the reason of Paraduma, in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Paraduma as a chayk. For Moshe Rabbeinu it was a mishpat. For Moshe Rabbeinu the paraduma was understood. He had a rational explanation for the mitzvah paraduma. So if Moshe Rabbeinu understood the reason of paraduma, how is it that specifically Moshe is the one that gives us the koyach to fulfill all the mitzvahs in a ifn of chukim? For Moshe Rabbeinu paraduma wasn't even a chayk. The Maamar is telling us that Yidden are meant to fulfill all the mitzvahs like the mitzvah paraduma, just like paraduma is a chayk. So too a Yid is meant to fulfill all the other mitzvahs in the same attitude, the same way he fulfills the mitzvah paraduma. And who gives us the koyach for this? Moshe Rabbeinu. But seemingly, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk. For him it was a mishpat. For him the mitzvah paraduma made sense. That's the question I've asked at the beginning of Seif Gimel, where we just learned the question. We ended off the last year with the question. Let's see the answer to this question inside. Says the Rebbe, says the Rebbe, in order to answer this question, we must preference what we've learned in other places in Chassidus, that the truth is every single mitzvah has two aspects to it. Every mitzvah is meant to be fulfilled as a chayk, and every mitzvah is meant to be fulfilled as a mishpat. What does this mean? That's going to explain. Why is this? Kol ha-mitzvahs, gam ha-mitzvahs de-edus u'mishpatim, sheyesh aleim tam, hem ritzoni yizbarech, v'rotzin hu l'mayla mitam, l'mayla gam ya-tamim shebechachmas yizbarech, u'la'ach yisharat in the mitzvahs. Gam ha-mitzvahs the-chukim afil mitzvah paraduma. Nimshach v'neslabish b'chachma d'Torah nitoseh b'hem tam. Says the Rebbe, every mitzvah is comprised, is made up of two parts. The foundation of every mitzvah is that Tzaratzon Hashem. Every mitzvah, whether it's a chukah, whether it's a mishpat, whether it's a edus, every single mitzvah is the foundation of the mitzvah, the essence of the mitzvah is that this is the Ratzon Hashem, this is what the Eibishter wants, whether it makes sense or not. Before the entire concept of intellect, of logic, of seichel and chachma was created, the Eibishter wanted these mitzvahs. Every single one of them. However, after the Eibishter wanted these mitzvahs, the Eibishter desired the fulfillment of these mitzvahs, whether they make sense or not. The Eibishter gave them tam. And like the Lashon of the Maimer, the mitzvahs were neslabish in chachma. The mitzvahs became enclosed into Torah. What does it mean they were neslabish? It means that the Eibishter gave them tam. It's something additional to them. Additional to their very essence, in addition to the fact that every mitzvah is the Ratzon the Eibishter also made these mitzvahs make sense. That they should be comprehended by logic, by seichel. However, so now, it begs the question, what's the difference between chukim and mishpatim? If every mitzvah was neslabish and tam, if every single mitzvah became part of the system of logic, then seemingly that would mean that every mitzvah is meant to make sense. So what's the difference between chukim and mishpatim? Says the Rebbe. The difference is, v'achiluk shebein ha-mitzvahs de'edus u'mishpatim la-mitzvahs de'chukim sheba-mitzvahs de'edus mishpatim hatamim shebechachmas yizbarich nimshechu v'neslabshu b'seichel ha-nivroim v'ad b'seichel ha-nushi u'ba-mitzvahs de'chukim hatam shalhem lo neslabshu kol kach b'seichel ha-nivroim. Says the Rebbe, there's a big difference between mishpatim and edus and chukim. Every mitzvah is the Ratzon Hashem. Every mitzvah was given a reason. However, there's two stages. There's what we call Chachmasa Yizbarich and Seichel Enushi. Chachmasa Yizbarich is the Eibishter's intellect. Godly intellect. Meaning, every single mitzvah was given a reason in Chachma Datzilos. In the Eibishter's intellect, the Eibishter's rules and the Eibishter's system of intellect does not work the same way our human intellect functions. We can't compare them at all. There's Chachmas Yizbarich, the Chachma of Atzilus, the Eibishter's godly wisdom. Then there is our Seichel Nusha human intellect. So when we say that all of the mitzvahs, every mitzvah, no matter what, whether it's a chayk, whether it's a mishpat, has a tam, we're talking about Chachma Atzilus. In the Eibishter's godly intellect, the Eibishter gave them reasons, gave the mitzvahs godly reasons. In Chachma Atzilus, every mitzvah makes sense. Every mitzvah has an understanding. In the Eibishter's understanding, every mitzvah makes sense. That's in Chachma Atzilus. However, not all of the mitzvahs got a reason in Seichel and Nushi, in human intellect. When we're talking about human intellect, that's where the difference begins. Some mitzvahs were neslabish and Seichel and Nushi more than others. Some mitzvahs, like the lav of don't kill, don't steal, honor your father and mother, tznius, etc. These mitzvahs were neslabish and Seichel, were fully neslabish and Seichel and Nushi. These mitzvahs make absolute sense in human intellect. You don't need to be a yid to fulfill these mitzvahs. Even if you're a guy, or even if you're, like it says, like the Rebbe brings, Sparach says many times, that even if you're an animal, you can comprehend, it can be natural to fulfill some of these mitzvahs. So that's some of the mitzvahs. Some of the mitzvahs, not only were they mislabish in the Eibishter's Chachma and Chachma Datzilos, in the Eibishter's in godly intellect, some of the mitzvahs were even neslabish in Seichel and Nushi. They became part and parcel of the human psyche, of human intellect. Some mitzvahs, the Eibishter set up the world in such a way that some of the things that he desired, should become part of the very fabric, so to speak, of the world. That the Eibishter created a world that some of the mitzvahs are mechuyev by Seichel and Nushi. Human intellect dictates that we should fulfill some of the mitzvahs of the Eibishter, some of the ritzainus of the Eibishter. However, not all of the mitzvahs were established in Seichel Nushi. And that's the difference between chukim and mishpatim. Mishpatim are mitzvahs that not only were they mislabish and chachmasi, yizbarich and chacham datzils and godly intellect, mishpatim and edus are mitzvahs that were mislabish in Seichel Nushi. And chukim are mitzvahs that were not mislabish in Seichel Nushi. Or like the Rebbe says, lo mislabish kol kach b'seichel nivroim. Some chukim are understood a little bit more than others. Like the Rambam says that all the mitzvahs have tamim. The Rambam writes this in Mer Nevuch, and he also writes this in the Rambam Miyad Chazaka, that all of the mitzvahs, even the mitzvah of chukim, which we do not understand, some parts of the mitzvah could be understood, even in Seichel Nushi. So that's the difference between chukim and mishpatim. The difference is how much was nislabish in Seichel Nushi, in human intellect. Says Rabban, there's a third category. And that's what's unique about paraduma. That paraduma is the only mitzvah that was not nislabish at all in Seichel Nushi, in human intellect. Paraduma is that one mitzvah that, although it was nislabish in Chachmasi Yisbarach, in Chacham Datzilus, although the mitzvah paraduma does have a reasoning and it could be explained, it is a rational mitzvah in Atzilus. Someone that is in tuned, someone that is able to comprehend godly intellect, does understand the mitzvah paraduma. But here in this world, the mitzvah paraduma cannot be understood at all by human intellect. Says there in the brackets, says there that Moshe is unique. We're going to learn a little bit later in Seif Hey about the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu. So here we're not going to elaborate on this idea, but the bottom line is that Moshe Rabbeinu, although he was a human being here in this world, he was an Ish Elikim. He was here in this world, and at the very same time, he was in tune and aware of what's going on in Atzilus. He was living in the reality of Atzilus. So Moshe Rabbeinu was a human living here in this world, but Yachad Demzeh, he was in Atzilus. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu was a person that was able to be living here. He was able to have Seichel Nushi, but he was also able to understand the reason for Paraduma. Because by him, the Chachma of Atzilus, godly intellect, was revealed to him. He was able to comprehend Chachma Atzilus. Fine. So that's what I've introduced over here, that there's every single mitzvah is, on the one hand, can be fulfilled like a chayk. Every mitzvah is a rotten shalom ma'ila tam. And on the other hand, every mitzvah has a tam, has a reasoning. The difference between Eidos, Chuk, Mishpatim is only if the reason it was the slabish, if it has a reason in Seichel and Nushi, if the reason of the mitzvah is something that can be understood by human intellect, or the reason is something that remains in Atzilus. If the reason of the mitzvah is something that can only be comprehended by godly intellect. But every mitzvah has a reasoning. Says the Rebbe, Zeu shebechol ha-mitzvahs, yesh lo shnei inyanim d'chuk mishpatim, shemitzad ha-rotzim d'mitzvahs, kol ha-mitzvahs chukim, v'kiyumim tzarech liyah b'derech kabal so, chuk ha-chakak digzeh gezarti. ומצד עניין טעמי המצווה, כל המצווה הם משפטים, וקיומם צריך ליאס, גם מצד הטעם. Says the Rebbe, and this is the explanation as to what we just said before, that every mitzvah is a chayk and a mishpat. On the one hand, every mitzvah, the foundation, the essence of every mitzvah, is that it is the ratzon of the Eibishter, it is Hashem's will, it's Hashem's desire, which transcends, which goes beyond tam, which goes beyond logic, goes beyond any rational explanation. And therefore, from that aspect, from that element of the mitzvahs, a yid is meant to fulfill the mitzvah b'derech kabbalah soul. Every single mitzvah is meant to be fulfilled just because it is the ratzon of the Eibishter, chukah chakak d'gzer gazarti. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, every mitzvah also has a reasoning. Whether it's a reasoning in Seichel Nushi, in human intellect, or it's a reason in Chacham Datzilus, in godly intellect. And mitzad, this element of the mitzvahs, every mitzvah is meant to be fulfilled mitzad atam. A person is meant to understand why he's fulfilling every mitzvah. So it says there, based off all this, Vayidesh and Moshe Yoda Tam the mitzvahs para Kiyim Gam Mitzvazu Mitzad Atam Mashenke B'chol Echad Kiyim Mitzvah Paraduma Mitzad Atam Who's Zashem is Bayin Shegam Mitzvazu Yesh Lotam. Says the Rebbe, and this was the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and all other Yidden. With regards to the mitzvah paraduma, all other Yidden, when they fulfill the mitzvah paraduma, that's the one mitzvah that they do not understand the reason at all. They fulfill it purely as a chayk. Although every mitzvah is done as a chayk, like we said before, every mitzvah is meant to be fulfilled because of the Ratzon of Hashem. But on the other hand, every mitzvah also has some sort of explanation as to why we fulfill the mitzvah. It has both. Every mitzvah is comprised, like we said, of both elements. However, by paraduma, we don't know the reason for paraduma because the reason remains in Chachma Datzilus. The mitzvah paraduma was never established in Seichel Anushi, in human intellect. So when a yid, a regular yid, fulfills the mitzvah paraduma, he fulfills it as a chayk. And like the Rebbe says in the brackets, but he's misbeinin that there is a tam, there is a reason to this mitzvah. A yid has to be aware of the fact there is a reason, but the yid does not know the reason. As opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, not only did Moshe Rabbeinu fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk, but Moshe Rabbeinu actually knew and he actually comprehended the mitzvah paraduma. And that's the difference between Moshe and every other yid when it comes to the mitzvah paraduma. By other yidin, the yidin don't actually know the reason. We just contemplate that there is a reason. We do not comprehend the reason. We just tell ourselves that we know that there is a reason. Chacham Datzilus, if we were to be in tune with the godly intellect of Chacham Datzilus, we would know the reason. but we don't actually know the reason. We just know there is a reason. As opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, he actually comprehended the mitzvah part, the reason for the mitzvah paraduma. Says the Rebbe, this can help us answer the question we asked in the beginning of Seif Gimel. Says the Rebbe, "V'pi ze yuvam bepashtus shegam mitzvah Moshe lechaser chas v'shalom ki ma mitzvah ba'if in the chukah chakakti gzer gezarti ki inyan zeh shebekiyam mitzvahs hu mitzad harotzen the mitzvahs." Says the Rebbe, based off this, we could answer the question we asked in the beginning of Seif Gimel very easily. Bepashtus, it's a very simple answer. Yes, it's true that Moshe Rabbeinu knew the reason to paraduma. He knew the reason to paraduma. But that doesn't mean that he was lacking the ability to fulfill the mitzvahs as a chayk. Because the truth is that every yid is meant to fulfill the mitzvahs as a chayk. Even the mitzvah mishpatim, even the mitzvahs that make sense are meant to be fulfilled as a chayk. Why is this? Because every mitzvah is the ratzon of Eibusha Shemayim Matam V'das. So there's no contradiction. Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu knew the reason of paraduma, but that doesn't mean that he was lacking the ability to fulfill the mitzvah also mitzvah the ratzon of Hashem. So it's not a contradiction at all. Based off this idea that I've introduced over here, that every mitzvah is made up of two parts. Every mitzvah is comprised of two elements. Every mitzvah is the ratzon shalamayim matam, and every mitzvah is the slabish tam. So just because Moshe Rabbeinu knew the tam of paraduma, that doesn't get rid of the fact that at the end of the day, the mitzvah paraduma is a ratzon shalamayim matam. And therefore Moshe was also able to fulfill this mitzvah as a chayk. So that answers the question we asked in the beginning of Seif Gimel. In the beginning of Seif Gimel we asked, seemingly Moshe Rabbeinu knew the reason for paraduma, so how is Moshe going to give us the koyach to fulfill the mitzvahs in Eifn of Chukim? The Rebbe is saying in Seif Beis that every yid is meant to fulfill every mitzvah like a chayk. And who gives us the koyach to fulfill the mitzvah like a chayk? Moshe Rabbeinu. But seemingly Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe asked in the beginning of Seif Gimel, Moshe Rabbeinu knew the reason of paraduma. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't fulfill the mitzvahs as a chayk. Says Rebbe, it's not a problem at all. Yes, Moshe comprehended the mitzvah paraduma, but at the end of the day, the mitzvah paraduma in its essence is the ratzon of Hashem. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a mishpat, as something that he understood, but he was also able to fulfill it as a chayk, mitzad the fact that the essence of the mitzvah paraduma is the ratzon shalamayim matam. Okay, that's the answer to the question that the Rebbe asked in the beginning of Seif Gimel. However, here the Rebbe is going to take the question a step further. Let's see right inside. Aval bi or zeh tzarich l'bir neisif. Ki ayis in the mitzvahs paradum legabi kol ha-mitzvahs hu shebechol ha-mitzvahs hatam shebem mailim al ha-ratzin uve-mitzvahs paradum she'en la hatam b'seichel adam ha-ratzin hu begilui upirish zeis chuksa teira hu shekol ha-mitzvah teira im chukah k'mei paradum. Says the Rebbe, okay, so every mitzvah in its essence is the ratzon of Hashem, and every mitzvah came into tam, was naslabish in tam. So what's the mile of paradum over all the other mitzvahs? Seemingly every mitzvah is equal. Every mitzvah is the ratzon of Hashem, and every mitzvah came into tam. What's the difference between paraduma? Why do we say that paraduma is zeis chukas ha-Torah? Paraduma is the chayk of the entire Torah. What's unique about paraduma? Every mitzvah is exactly the same. Says the Rebbe, it's obvious. The difference between paraduma and the other mitzvahs is obvious. The other mitzvahs, true, their foundation is that they're the ratzon of Hashem. Every mitzvah is the ratzon of Hashem. But at the end of the day, the mitzvah was naslabish in tam. The mitzvah gained a certain reason, a certain rational explanation. And therefore it's very hard, it's very difficult for us to be in tune with the ratzon shalamayim matam, with the essence of the mitzvah. Being that the mitzvah came into tam, being that the mitzvah gained a certain explanation, so therefore it's very hard for us to be aware and to be in tune with the fact that this mitzvah is the ratzon of Hashem shalamayim matam. There's one mitzvah that being that we do not comprehend the reason for this mitzvah, so it's very clear, it's very apparent to us that this mitzvah is the Eibus's ratzon shalamayim matam, and that is paraduma. Being that paraduma was not mislabish in tam, so it's very clear, it's very apparent to us that this mitzvah we're meant to fulfill as a ratzon shalamayim matam. And the mitzvah paraduma is the zeis chukos ha-Torah. The mitzvah paraduma, which is, it's obvious, it's clear that this mitzvah is the ratzon of the Eibush shalamayim matam, sheds light on all the other mitzvahs. Just like paraduma is ratzon shalamayim matam, so to all the other mitzvahs. Even though we do understand, we do have a reason, we do have an explanation for those mitzvahs, still we're meant to do them like a chayk, as like paraduma. So that's the difference by us between paraduma and all the other mitzvahs. What's unique about paraduma? That paraduma is only mitzvah that the ratzon shalamayim matam is bigoli, it's revealed and apparent by the mitzvah paraduma. Says the Rebbe, umizeh shenemar v'yikhui lecho, da'apor nekras al shmei shel Moshe, mashma, the inyan hamyuchad shel mitzvos paraduma, shechuk o sheba, ratzon l'mayla matam begilui, hu gam legabi Moshe. Says the Rebbe, based on what we just said, that what is unique about paraduma is that it's the only mitzvah in which the Ratzon Shel Hamayla Matam is revealed. That's what's unique about paraduma. And Rashi says, L'oilam inikras al shmecha, that paraduma is associated with Moshe Rabbeinu. It's mashma that would seem to imply that there's a connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and what is unique about paraduma. When we're saying there's a connection between paraduma and Moshe, obviously we're saying that whatever is unique, whatever is special, whatever is miyuchad about paraduma, that unique function, that unique quality of paraduma is connected with Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, what is unique about paraduma? The fact that the ratzon of the Eibishter, the will, the desire of the Eibishter, which transcends intellect, is revealed in paraduma. That's what's unique about paraduma. That's what we just said before. Seemingly, if we're saying that that paraduma is connected with Moshe, that would mean that this unique quality that the ratzon of Hashem is revealed in paraduma is connected to Moshe. Says Rabbi B'Lachayra, okay, when Shemoshe yada tam para, ma'u achiluk l'gabi Moshe b'mitzvahs paraduma l'chol mitzvahs. Says Rebbe, but we just said that by Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe understood, Moshe did comprehend, Moshe was able to comprehend the godly intellect, the godly explanation of the mitzvah paraduma. And if so, legabe Moshe, there's no difference between paraduma and all other mitzvahs. In the beginning of Seif Gimel, the question the Rebbe asked was, how was Moshe able to fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk? In general, if Moshe understood the reason for paraduma, that would seemingly imply that Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk. So the Rebbe went on the whole Seif Gimel to explain that that's not true. Moshe Rabbeinu was still able to fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk. Why? Because at the end of the day, the essence of the mitzvah, the essence of every mitzvah, and the essence of paraduma is that the ratzon of Hashem. And mitzad that element, mitzad that aspect of the mitzvah, Moshe was still able to fulfill the mitzvah as a chayk. So that's not a question. Moshe had the ability to fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk. The Rebbe here is asking a new question. Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to fulfill the mitzvah paraduma as a chayk, as a ratzon shel hamayla matam. But Moshe was able to do that by every mitzvah. There was nothing special, there was nothing unique by Moshe Rabbeinu in the mitzvah of paraduma over all the other mitzvahs. By Moshe Rabbeinu, just like every mitzvah is the ratzon of Hashem shel hamayla matam, and every mitzvah is also established in tam, so too by Moshe Rabbeinu, so too the same can be said with regards to paraduma. Paraduma is a ratzon shel hamayla matam. In its essence, it's the Eibishter's will, it's the Eibishter's desire that transcends seichel, but it's a mitzvah that's established in tam. So why are we saying L'olam yinikras al shmecha? L'olam yinikras al shmecha would seem to imply that the unique quality of paraduma, that paraduma is the only mitzvah in which it's clear and apparent that it's the ratzon shel hamayla matam, is connected with Moshe Rabbeinu. When we say paraduma is the nikras al shmecha, again, that would imply that the unique quality of paraduma is associated with Moshe Rabbeinu. But seemingly, the unique quality of Moshe Rabbeinu does not apply. The unique quality of paraduma is not applicable to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's applicable to us. Us, human beings that do not comprehend the Chachma Datzilos, for us, there's something unique about paraduma. But for Moshe Rabbeinu, seemingly there's nothing unique about paraduma. So why are we saying La'il min nikras al shmecha? That's the question, the last and final question I was asking here in Seif Gimel, which is the end of the Dibra Maskal. Now, here in Seif Dalid is where we begin the next part of the Maimer. In order to answer this question, in order to explain how is it, or why is it, that the paraduma is nikras al shmecha, what is the unique connection between the mitzvah paraduma and Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe goes on to introduce the concept of tefillah l'Moshe, a new idea. Tefillah l'Moshe, it's a pasuk in Tehillim that says there's a tefillah l'Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu has a tefillah, he has a prayer, he has a bakash, he has a request from the Eibishter. The Rebbe is going to go on to discuss in Sif Dalid, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud, the concept of Tefillah Moshe. And eventually, after the Rebbe discusses at length this idea of Tefillah Moshe, the Rebbe in Sifir Aleph is going to ask a similar question to the question we just asked here in Seif Gimel. And by explaining and by answering that question in Sifir Aleph, the Rebbe is going to bring us back to the Dibra Maskal and answer this question that we just asked now in the end of Seif Gimel. Let's see Seif Dalid inside. Here the Rebbe is introducing the concept of Tefillah Moshe. Says the Rebbe, V'yuvin zebehekti, mashakos Tefillah Moshe. V'isa b'zayar, shetefillah Moshe tilas ashir. The Rebbe introduces, there's a pasuk in Tehillim that says, Tefillah Moshe. Moshe has a prayer. Moshe has a request. It says in the Zayar that Moshe's tefillah is a tilas ashir. It says in the Zayar that there's a tefillah ani. David HaMelech has a bakasha, has a tefillah of an ani, of a poor person. Moshe Rabbeinu has a tefillas asher. He davens, he has a prayer, he has a request, the request of a rich person. So the Rebbe is going to discuss at length what is a tefillas usher. Before the Rebbe does that, this is kind of a side note over here, that the Rebbe wants to bring out and let us know that this idea of tefillah l'meisha and tefillas usher has a unique connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Says the Rebbe Lohoyer, Mimashakos of Chak Me'echad Mor, Bala Gula B'sichas Yedua, Shemizmer Tefillah l'meisha Shaykh Lagul Yidiotas Kislev, Uki Yedua Sha'ad Mar Zakin Ya'ema B'chol Yem, Shiur Tilim K'meish Nechlak L'Me'ach Hayidash, V'kev on Shamizmer Tefillah l'meisha, Hu Aschol L'Shir Tilim Achot Y'Yem Hayutas L'Chayidash, Hay'amar B'Yem Gulasei Yutas Kislev Mizmer Zeh. Says the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe says in a Sicha that the Mizmer, this pasuk in Tilim, this kapitel in Tilim of Tefillah l'meisha has a unique connection to the Geula of Yutas Kislev. Why? What is the connection between this Mizmer, this kapitel of Tefillah l'meisha, and the Geula of Yutas Kislev? Says the Rebbe, because we know, the Frierdiker writes in a letter that the Rabbeim would say Tehillim, though it's split up for the month. Tehillim, we know, could be split in many ways. One way that Tehillim is split up is for the week. You could finish the whole Tehillim every week. Tehillim is split up for the days of the week. But Tehillim is also split up for the days of the month. And the Rabbeim had the minig to say the Tehillim every single day of the month and finish the entire Tehillim every month. That was the minig of the Rabbeim. So Yud Tes Kislev, which is the day that the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, what kapitel Tehillim do you start saying on Yud Tes Kislev? The Mizmer of Tefillah l'meisha. So that is the connection. That is the unique connection between the kapitel of Tefillah l'meisha and Yud Tes Kislev. Says the Rebbe, the Bizeh move on, but this teaches us Shemizmer Zeh Shaykh Gam Lagul Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz Hagul the Nesidereinu Memalim Mekayim Shabal Lagul Yud Tes Kislev. Says the Rebbe, if the kapitel of Tefillah l'meisha is connected to Yud Tes Kislev, to the Geul of the Alter Rebbe, then this must tell us that the kapitel, the mizmer of Tefillah l'meisha is also connected to Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz. Because what happened in Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz? The Frierdiker Rebbe also had a geula, and being that the Frierdiker Rebbe is the malam makim of the Alter Rebbe, every single Rebbe, every one of the Rebbeim is the malam makim of the Rebbe before him, which would mean that the Frierdiker Rebbe is the malam makim of the Alter Rebbe. So if this mizmer, if this kapitel had a unique connection to the geula of the Alter Rebbe, then that would seemingly tell us that when the Frierdiker Rebbe, which is the mamal makim of the Alter Rebbe, had his geula, l'chora we can say that his geula is also connected with the mizmer of Tefillah l'meisha. Says the Rebbe in the brackets, the Rebbe takes a step further to strengthen the connection that the Frierdiker Rebbe has to this mizmer, to this kapitel of Tefillah l'meisha. Says Rebbe, b'frat b'shana zu shebiyud beis Tammuz yei malez the balagula hu aschala shnasat tzadik the balagula ubei maschilim leimar mizmer tzadik shebetehillim u mizmer Tefillah l'meisha. Says the Rebbe, especially in this year, the Rebbe said this Maimon year Tavshin Chavtes, and the year Tavshin Chavtes was 90 years from the birth of the Frierdiker Rebbe. We know there's another minig, besides for the minig of saying kapitel the way it's split up for the week, and besides for the idea of saying the kapitel the way it's split, the Tehillim the way it's split up for the month, there's an idea to say the kapitel that corresponds to the age of the person. If a person is 89 years old, going into his 90th year, so then he says kapitel tzadik. Says the Rebbe, we know the Frierdiker Rebbe was born, the geula of the Frierdiker Rebbe was on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, but the Frierdiker Rebbe was also born on Yud Beis Tammuz. And on this year in Tavshin Chavtes, the Frierdiker Rebbe would start saying the kapitel tzadik. Is the Frierdiker Rebbe will be celebrating his 89th birthday, going into his 90th year, and therefore he would start saying the kapitel tzadik. Kapitel tzadik, what is kapitel tzadik? It is the kapitel of Tefillah l'meisha. So, in general, the kapitel of Tefillah l'meisha is connected with the geula of the Alter Rebbe. If it's connected with the geula of the Alter Rebbe, it's for sure connected with Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. It's connected to the geula of the Frierdiker Rebbe. But says the Rebbe takes a step further, especially this year in Tavshin Chavtes, that Yud Beis Tammuz, which is the birthday of the Frierdiker Rebbe starts saying kapitel tzadik. So for sure, there's a unique connection between this kapitel and Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz in the year Tavshin Chavtes. Says the Rebbe now, what is the meaning of this kapitel? In Yon, Nivitechni the Mizmer Zeh, Tefillah l'meisha. Then Yonim abayim behemshech hamizmer la'acher tevis Tefillah l'meisha ishalikim heiman Yonim shemeisha amram bitvilasi in Yonim apratim. Avon Yoni hakloli da mizmer shu gam shmei da mizmer Tefillah l'meisha. The Tefillah l'meisha tefillas asher kana. Says the Rebbe, when we say that the capital is connected to Yutes Kislev, or the capital is connected to Yud Beis Tammuz, what do we mean? What are we referring to? Which part of the capital? There's many psukim in the capital. This mizmar of Tefillah Moshe has many details. There are many parts to the tefillah. Which part in particular, which specific part of the mizmar is connected to Yutes Kislev, to Yud Beis Tammuz? So says the Rebbe, obviously, when we say that the capital is connected to Yutes Kislev, Yud Beis Tammuz, we're talking about the general nekuda, the general theme of the capital. What's the general theme of the capital? The first words, Tefillah l'Moshe ish Elokim. That this is a tefillah, this is a request, this is a bakasha of Moshe Rabbeinu. Which, as we started off in Sif Dalet, that the tefillah Moshe, says in the Zayir, the tefillah Moshe, the tefillah is Asher. That's the general theme of this capital. The capital speaks about many things. But like the Rebbe says here in the brackets, the particular details and the hemshach, the continuation of the capital, those are the details of what Moshe's tefillah was, what he was davening about. But the general theme of the capital is, like the capital starts off, that it's a tefillah l'Moshe ish Elokim. That this capital is a tefillah, a prayer, a bakasha of Moshe Rabbeinu, which the tefillah l'Moshe is a tefillah Asher. So says the Rebbe, being that that's the general theme of the capital, being that the general concept, the overall description of this capital is that it's a tefillah l'Moshe, is that it's a tefillah Asher. So says the Rebbe, mizem muvan, shashayich is the mizmer lagul Yutes Kislev. V'yud Beis Tammuz u'beikim mitzadin yani l'chlos ha-mizmer tefillah l'Moshe tefillah Asher ki l'kaman Sifid Gimel. Says the Rebbe, so if we are going to connect this mizmer, this capital, to Yutes Kislev, if we are going to connect this mizmer, this capital, to Yud Beis Tammuz, what connection do we need to find? Where do we need to find the connection? How are we supposed to connect this mizmer to Yutes Kislev, Yud Beis Tammuz? We are specifically going to connect the general theme of the capital to Yud Beis Tammuz. We are going to connect the general theme of this mizmer to Yutes Kislev. What is that general theme? Tefillah l'Moshe, tefillah Asher. So that's what Rebbe's going to go on to, and that's what Rebbe's going to explain in Sifid Gimel. Now Rebbe's going to go on, Barichos and Simhei, Vav, etc., to explain the idea of Tefillah l'Moshe, tefillah Asher. Because again, that's the main idea that we want to explain over here. The capital is filled with many details. There are many psuk in the capital. But the overall, general theme of the capital is the idea of Tefillah l'Moshe, which is a tefillah Asher. So the Rebbe is going to go on at length to explain the idea of what is a tefillah Asher. What does a tefillah of an Asher mean? And once the Rebbe will explain what the tefillah Asher is, the Rebbe will connect the idea of tefillah Asher to Yutes Kislev and to Beis Tammuz. But again, in order to do so, in order to connect this capital to Yutes Kislev, Yud Beis Tammuz, we first need to explain what is the idea of a tefillah Asher. Let's see Sefei inside. The Mamor, Vidibar Maskul to Lamesha, says the Rebbe, in order to understand what is a tefillah Asher, we must preface the Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab says it has a Maimer Tafrish Samach with this Dibar Maskul to Lamesha. So the Rebbe Rashab asks a question in his Maimer. Hare, in Yinat Tefillah, Ushemispal L'Akadosh Baruch Hu, Sheyumalis Machseiri. V'kevon Asher Ini Chasashum Davar Ma'u Inyan Tefillah Asher. The Rebbe Rashab asks in his Maimer to Lamesha. The Rebbe Rashab asks in his Maimer to Lamesha, what is a tefillah Asher? We know the Rambam tells us what is the idea of tefillah. What is the mitzvah of tefillah? What does it mean to daven to the Eibishter? Davening means, and it's the basic meaning of davening is they're asking the Eibishter Sheyamalas Machseir, the Eibishter should fill what you are lacking. The Eibishter should provide you with what you need. That's what davening. That's what tefillah is. Asking the Eibishter they should provide you with your needs. So the Rebbe Rashab says, seemingly, if you're an usher doesn't have any chesrenis. A usher is not lacking anything. What does this mean? Let's take a moment to explain what the Rebbe Rashab here means, because this is going to be a big theme in the Maimer. We find that in an ani, we have two categories. A basic ani, a basic poor person, is somebody that doesn't have his basic and essential needs. Such a person, obviously a person that's lacking his basic and essential needs, is considered an ani, is considered a poor person. And we as Yidden have a mitzvah of tzedakah, a mitzvah to give this Yid, to give him his needs, to provide him with having his basic and essential needs. That's the most basic level of an ani, of a poor person. However, Chazal tell us, based on the pasuk, it says in the pasuk that we're meant to give a person his needs. So Chazal tell us this doesn't only mean that we're meant to give a poor person, somebody that's lacking his most basic needs, that we're meant to provide him with his most basic needs. But the pasuk is teaching us something a little deeper. Let's say you have a person that used to be rich. He used to have a fancy horse, and he used to have avodim. In the olden days, I guess the custom was that you would have avodim, you'd have servants running in front of you whenever you would travel, etc. So you had a person that was accustomed to this wealthy lifestyle, and then he lost some of his money. And now he does not have the ability to afford a fancy horse or a fancy car, etc. But he has his basic needs. He's able to survive. He has food, he has clothing, he's able to survive. It's just that he went down in his wealth. He lost some of his money, and he can't afford the extras. And now he's not able to afford the wealthy lifestyle that he was accustomed to living in before. So Chazal tell us, the pasuk that says Deimach Seireh Shayachsle is teaching us that you are mechuyev, we are obligated to even give this person tzedakah. Being that this person was accustomed to such a lifestyle, so now he is considered an ani relative to these items. Although most people that were never accustomed to having a sus, to having a fancy car or a fancy horse, so if they don't have a horse, if they don't have a fancy car, they're not considered poor. As long as they have their basic and essential needs, they're not considered poor. But this person that was once accustomed to having these fancy, these extras, these meisters, he was accustomed to having this wealthy lifestyle, so you are mechuyev to give him stuck as well, to help him get back to himself, to help him get back to the wealthy lifestyle that he was living in the past. So now, we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is an usher. Moshe is an usher. Tefillah, Moshe is a tefillas usher. Obviously, an usher is a person that is not lacking anything. Because even if if a person would be lacking a sus lirkayv or eved laretz lefanov, he wouldn't be considered an usher. Because based on what we just said, an usher doesn't mean someone that has his basic needs. An usher means someone that's not lacking anything. The moment you're lacking something that you are accustomed to having, you're not an usher, you're an ani. And people are mechuyev to give you tzedakah. If you had a rich person that lost some of his money and now he doesn't have a fancy horse, so although he has all of his basic and essential needs, he's considered an ani. And he could get tzedakah from other people. So what we see from this is that if you're lacking something, you're considered an ani. If we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is an usher, it means he's not lacking anything. So what's his tefillah? What's he davening? If he's an usher, he's not lacking anything. The Rambam tells us, what's the mitzvah of tefillah? What's davening? Davening is you should ask the Eibishter, Shimalas Machseiri. The Eibishter should provide you with what you're lacking. But an usher, by definition, means someone that's not lacking anything. So that's the question of the Rebbe Shab. What is a tefillas usher? Says Rebbe Weiter Vishleimar. Says the Rebbe, this question of the Rebbe Shab must be only with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Why is this question only with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu? Says the Rebbe, the Ba'asher B'chlal Yishleimar Shatfila Shaloi Shakadosh Baruch Hu Malas Machsir HaRuchni Mash'enki B'Moshe Shegam B'Yis Lamat Hey, baby, Gilia Makar Shleika Moshe Batzilos, Va'ach in Mechitza V'Hafsik Beinayem, Moshe Leipsik Taimo, Harry move on, Zesh, and Moshe Osher Begashmis, Ulufishe Osher Beruchnis. Says the Rebbe, this question of the Rebbe Shab is only with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu. When it comes to a regular person who's an usher, although you might be an usher, Begashmis, on one realm, in the realm of physicality, you may be an usher, you may be wealthy. But with regards to his ruchnistic needs, with regards to his spiritual needs, he may be considered an ani. You could have a person that has all of his basic needs. Not only does he have all of his basic needs, but he even has an abundance. He lives a wealthy lifestyle. That's all begashmis. But beruchnis, on his spiritual level, on his spiritual status, he may be lacking. So then it's understood why he's davening to the Eibishter. What's his chisaron? What's his need? What's he lacking? He's lacking in his spiritual status. And that's why he's davening to the Eibishter. That's with a regular usher. However, says the Rebbe, with regards to Moshe, we can't say this. Why? Because we know Moshe Rabbeinu, there's something unique about Moshe. The Rebbe brings here the lashon of that. It's brought in the Zohar. It's brought in many places in Chassidus that says Moshe psik taima begavai. Sometimes we find by different ovis, like let's say for example by Avram. It says in the Torah Avram 2 times. So we find that by ovis. We find by Moshe as well. By Moshe, by the sneh, it says in the Torah Moshe. But it says in the Zohar there's a difference between Moshe and Avram. By Avram, there's a psik, there's a hefsik in the punctuation between the 2 names of Avram. There's a separation. As opposed to by Moshe, there's no separation. The Zohar tells us, and it's before Chassidus, that what does this represent? That by Avram, there's a difference how he was l'mayla, how he was in his sheirish, how he was in his source, and how he found himself here in this physical world. There was some sort of differentiation, some sort of separation. As opposed to by Moshe, there was no difference between Moshe's source, the way Moshe is in Elam Atzilos, and the way Moshe lived here on earth, here in this physical world. Moshe's makar, Moshe's sheirish, the way Moshe existed in Elam Atzilos was felt and was revealed here, the way he lived here on earth. There was no differentiation. What does this tell us? That if Moshe was an Asher Begashmias, if Moshe was a physically wealthy, it must be because Moshe was spiritually wealthy as well. Because again, like we just said, Moshe, loy psik taima begavai. There's no hefsek, there's no mechitza, there's no barrier, there's nothing separating Moshe the way he existed in his spiritual realms, and Moshe the way he existed here in this physical earth. So if Moshe here was a physical usher, if Moshe was physically wealthy, that tells us and that shows that he was also wealthy on a spiritual level. So when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, we can't say that Moshe was physically wealthy, but he was davening for spiritual wealth, because obviously if he had physical wealth, that was an expression of the fact that he was spiritually wealthy. Says Rebbe weiter, Hainu, shegam beruchnis, lechas lishum davar, gam lechsarn shebedugmasus lirkev Allah, v'aretz lefanov. What does it mean that Moshe was spiritually wealthy? It means that he was not lacking anything. He wasn't even lacking the idea of sus lirkev lefanov, v'avid laretz lefanov. He wasn't even lacking the concept of having a fancy horse and servants running in front of him. Whatever that will represent in the spiritual realms. We'll see soon in the next paragraph what exactly those ideas represent, beruchnis. But says there, that's the idea, that Moshe Rabbeinu was an usher. And if he was an usher begashmius, he must have been an usher beruchnis. Because by Moshe Rabbeinu, we cannot differentiate, we can't separate between gashmius and ruchnis. It's all the same thing by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe's source, the way Moshe existed in Atzilos, was felt and was revealed here in this physical world. So if Moshe was an Asher Baruchnis and Begashmius, Lachem Medaik by Maimer Mao Intus Asher. That's the diuk of the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Shab's Mibudaik. The Rebbe Shab's asking, what does it mean that Moshe had a tefillah? Specifically Moshe. If Moshe was an Asher, and like we just said, that Moshe is an Asher Begashmius means the Asher Baruchnis, so what's he davening for? Now the next paragraph, the Rebbe brings Weiter from the Maimer Rebbe Rashab, where the Rebbe Rashab is going to strengthen this question. He's going to strengthen this question. Let's see the next paragraph inside. The Rebbe Rashab goes on to prove that an usher doesn't only refer to someone that's not lacking anything. A person could not be lacking anything. He's not even lacking his wealthy lifestyle. But he's still not called an usher. Still not called an usher. What's an usher? So it's mushba b'ribei shefa. Only a person that has abundance is called an usher. What does this mean? The pasuk says that let's say you had someone that was accustomed to living a wealthy lifestyle, and now he lost some of his wealthy lifestyle. So it says in the Gemara, you have a chiyuv to return. You have a chiyuv to bring him back to his original status. You have a chiyuv to bring him back to his wealthy lifestyle, to the lifestyle he was living originally, but you're not mechuyev to make him rich. Now, you could ask yourself, this person was accustomed to having a horse, accustomed to having avodim. He was accustomed to having a wealthy lifestyle. Now he lost some of that wealthy lifestyle. And you have a chiyuv to give him tzedakah and to bring him back to that wealthy lifestyle. So doesn't that mean you're making him an usher? Doesn't that mean you're making him rich? But the Gemara says, you fill his needs, you provide him with his needs, you provide him with what he's lacking, you provide him with what he was accustomed to having, but you don't make him rich. Says the Rebbe Rashab, what do we see from this? That being rich, being wealthy, doesn't only mean to have your needs. It doesn't only mean to have the things that you're accustomed to. If a person has all of his needs, he has everything he's accustomed to, he's still not rich. Being rich means that you have more than what you're used to. So it comes out there's three dargis, there's three levels. One level is a person that doesn't have his basic essential needs. Then he's for sure an ani. Even a person that has his basic needs, he has his basic needs, but he doesn't have what he used to have. He doesn't have what he was accustomed. Doesn't have the lifestyle he was accustomed to having. He's still an ani. He's still a poor person. What happens if you have a person that you fill his needs? You give him everything that he was accustomed to. Now is he rich? Says the Rebbe Shab, it's clear from the Gemara, he's still not rich. Why? Because he only has what he's accustomed to. A rich person means a person that has more than he was accustomed to. He's mushba beribu yashefa. Says the Rebbe weiter, v'kei, when Shabdei machzeh sheyachsle. Nichol gamach sar nesus lirkev ol, v'eved larz lefanov, v'af apikein amr v'yetem tzuv la'ashrei, hari move on, shegam kshiyash le'kol tzrachov, koi lo gam sus lirkev ol, v'eved larz lefanov, ein ne'adayin asher. Ki ina asher loy, da kshiyash le'kol tzrachov, also mushba beribu yashefa. Says the Rebbe Shab, comes out clear that if we're saying dei machseide asher yachsel v'iyatem tzuv la'ashrei, what does it mean? What does it mean to provide a person with his needs? What's included in providing a person with his needs? Included in providing a person with his needs is providing him with what he was accustomed to. Even a sus lirkev alav ve'eved larz lefanov. And if that's not considered an asher, what does that teach us? What does that show us? That an asher means not only that someone has his basic necessities, and not only is an asher someone that has everything he needs, everything he's accustomed to, An usher means a person that has more than was accustomed to. Mushva b'ribi hashefa. Which that's also going to strengthen the question, what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu had a tefillah? What's tefillah l'Moshe? Moshe Rabbeinu is an usher. He's an usher b'gashmis and b'ruchnius. And usher means not only do you have your basic needs, not only do you have everything you're accustomed to, an usher means you're mushva b'ribi hashefa. You have more than what you're accustomed to. So what's the tefillah of Moshe? What's Moshe asking for? Here in the rest of the paragraph, the Rebbe is going to go on to explain what exactly are these three dargis b'ruchnius. We just said there's three dargis. There's a person that has his basic needs. There's a person that has more than his basic needs, but it's only what he's accustomed to. And then there's a person that has more than what he's accustomed to. What are these three dargis b'ruchnius? That's what the Rebbe is going on to explain in the rest of this paragraph. And that's where the sugya of Amali, Seif, and Atmos comes in. The Rebbe is going to introduce these three dargis in connection with the three dargis of the person that has his basic needs, the person that has more than his basic needs, but only what he's accustomed to, and to an usher that's mushba b'ribi hashefa. But we are going to learn the rest of that paragraph, Be'ez Hashem, in the following shiurim.